Future historians will grapple with the Epstein affair as one of the most extraordinary phenomena of its era. A case built around one of the most universally condemned criminals in recent memory, yet one whose full consequences remain stubbornly, scandalously unresolved. At its heart is an urgent and legitimate question. To what degree were others complicit in his crimes? And yet, that question, which should cut cleanly across every line of politics and privilege, has, in the United States at least, been systematically neutered by partisan theater. Today, Hillary Clinton walked into a deposition room to answer questions about Jeffrey Epstein. Tomorrow, Bill Clinton is scheduled to do the same. The Clintons had demanded that these hearings be held in public, anticipating, with considerable justification, that Republicans would selectively leak extracts from closed-door sessions to manufacture maximum damage with minimum context. That request was denied. The sessions are being recorded and may eventually be released to the public, but the fear was valid. This is theater. Neither Clinton is accused of any wrongdoing. Hillary Clinton's presence at the deposition is, frankly, difficult to justify. She appears nowhere in the Epstein Files except in news headlines. Her summons is guilt by innuendo. It is a deliberate sleight of hand. Redirect attention away from Donald Trump, Howard Lutnick, or Peter Thiel, people with documented connections to Epstein, and instead perform a pantomime of accountability that implies scandal is a bipartisan affliction equally distributed, when it manifestly is not. This matters with particular urgency right now because of mounting evidence that the current administration may be actively shielding the sitting president of the United States. No one should be surprised. A Trump-controlled Department of Justice doing whatever it takes to protect Donald Trump was not some dark fantasy. It was a predictable, foreseeable outcome, predicted by thousands of observers, this channel included. The downside of constructing an administration around serial dishonesty is that nobody believes your integrity when it's actually on the line. You've spent years proving you have none. The detail drawing the most attention in recent days? At least 90 FBI interview records appear to be missing from the public database. Among those absent files are 3 follow-up interviews with a woman who made a specific allegation of sexual abuse against Donald Trump. If equivalent interviews had surfaced alleging similar conduct by Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, the MAGA universe would have treated it as a smoking gun requiring no further corroboration. Allegations against Trump, by contrast, meet a wall of instant dismissal. The MAGA ecosystem has, after all, spent years generating enormous energy around a completely fabricated Obama plot against Trump, evidence entirely optional. And yet, an allegation remains an allegation. The accusation against Trump in the Epstein Files is unproven. If made in the run-up to an election, as this was, there exists every incentive for a bad actor to fabricate such a claim in order to destroy a candidate's chances. You cannot invoke due process as a principled defense against Trump's abuses and then quietly abandon its demanding standard when the accusation suits you politically. The standard must hold. But here is the thing. If an administration chooses to suppress, conceal, or destroy the records relating to such an allegation, that is not the behavior of an innocent party. That is the behavior of someone who believes the evidence would be damaging. Another president once discovered, to his ruin, that the cover-up was worse than the crime. His name is not difficult to remember. The release of the Epstein Files was itself a masterclass in incompetence. Having spent years stoking conspiracy theories around Epstein, casting Trump as a righteous avenger who would expose the secret network of powerful predators, the administration found itself pushed and bullied by its own base into releasing everything. It did so with the grace and precision we have come to associate with the Trump operation. Names that should have been redacted were published in full. Names and faces and, horrifyingly, images of underage children that should never have been released were. An absolute chaotic shambles. 3 million pages dumped into the public domain with neither care nor strategy, to be sifted through by journalists, researchers, and ordinary citizens who are doing the work that institutions seem unwilling or unable to do. New revelations have arrived almost daily since, and in some places, consequences have followed, arguably appropriate, certainly more substantial than anything seen in the United States. In Britain, former Prince Andrew, already stripped of his royal title and exiled from the working royal family after revealing himself to be, at minimum, a thoroughly repugnant individual who kept company with a convicted sex offender and seemed to feel no shame about it, was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The allegation? That while serving as a trade envoy, he passed commercially sensitive information to Epstein. King Charles III issued a statement that the law must take its course. To some ears, a statement of the blindingly obvious. But in a world where powerful men, crowned and otherwise, have historically operated beyond legal reach, it was not nothing. In another corner of British life, Peter Mandelson, now simply Peter Mandelson, having been stripped of the Lord prefix along with much else, was arrested, released on bail, forced out of the Labour Party, and resigned from the House of Lords. Both men, if convicted of misconduct in public office, could theoretically face life imprisonment. Unlikely in practice, serious in principle. Morgan McSweeney, a senior figure in Prime Minister Keir Starmer's team, was forced to resign not for appearing in the files, he does not, but for having recommended Mandelson's appointment. Starmer himself, who also appears nowhere in any Epstein document, has nonetheless been in political crisis because of them. The chain of accountability climbs. Elsewhere, in Norway, a former prime minister was charged with gross corruption. An ambassador resigned. The former Norwegian foreign minister stepped down as head of the World Economic Forum. The crown princess issued a public apology for maintaining contact with Epstein after his 2008 conviction. In France, 2 criminal investigations were opened. In Slovakia, the national security advisor resigned. Latvia and Lithuania launched official inquiries into potential trafficking. Poland's prime minister ordered a dedicated team to comb through the files. In the United States, as of this recording, no one has been charged with a crime. Epstein's network was deeper and broader in America than anywhere else in the world. It reached into the heart of the political establishment, into Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and the current administration. The fallout has been a fraction of what Europe has produced. Rob Ford, professor of political science at the University of Manchester, observed that in Britain, if you are in the files, it becomes a major story immediately. He suggested this reflects a more functional media and a more functional accountability structure, and, crucially, that there remains a degree of shame in British politics. People will say, this is not acceptable. This is not done. The question of shame in politics is worth sitting with. Boris Johnson was Trumpian in his contempt for consequences, brazening out lie after lie, blunder after blunder. But Johnson was a relative aberration, and he did not last long enough for shamelessness to become institutionalized. The UK body politic has its serious problems, but it has not yet rotted through in the way the American system has under the weight of a decade of norm demolition. Alex Thomas of the Institute for Government pointed to the structural mechanics. A prime minister must retain the confidence of Parliament to remain in office. When one figure in a chain falls, scrutiny moves upward. That, he argued, is not a design flaw. That is the system working. In the United States, the presidency operates differently. In an era when shame still existed in American political life, accountability remained at least theoretically possible. But with a slavishly loyal Congress, a fully captured Department of Justice, and a media ecosystem that insulates Trump's base from any negative information, providing them instead with a fully formed alternative reality, accountability has become largely symbolic. The perverse irony is this: the reason Epstein became such an obsession for the MAGA movement in the first place was the QAnon years, the years of Pizzagate and the secret network of powerful pedophiles that supposedly ran the world. Trump was cast as the righteous force of justice coming to expose them all. There is a relatively small but real overlap between that mythology and actual reality. just enough to keep the frenzy alive. Republican strategist Matthew Bartlett put it plainly: the administration helped create this monster from the outside. Once in power, they continued to feed it. And the monster is now beginning to feed on the administration's own credibility. By November 2025, polling showed that the share of Republicans who said the Epstein Files affected their view of Donald Trump had dropped from roughly half to just 36%. Mentions of Epstein on MAGA social media and podcasts went conspicuously quiet the moment Democrats began releasing documents carrying Trump's name. Raheem Kassam of the National Pulse captured the logic. As soon as the legacy media suddenly started caring about it, and caring about only one person in particular, it became suspicious to the MAGA base. This is the iron law of American polarization. If they say it, it's fake. If we say it, it's gospel. The base can persuade itself that a report from the New York Times about missing Trump-related documents constitutes proof that those documents do not exist, or, if they do, that they are fabricated, irrelevant, or the product of space aliens. Anything. Something. But it cannot mean that anything matters. The Clinton depositions are not entirely without merit. Bill Clinton did fly on Epstein's plane. His photograph appears throughout the released documents. It is entirely appropriate to put serious questions to someone who has been credibly established to have moved in these circles, a man who by most accounts was a competent president, but who has also demonstrated, repeatedly, that his judgment and conduct in certain areas are not above question. This is why some Democrats crossed the aisle to support a contempt vote against the Clintons when they initially refused to testify. But the exercise is ostentatiously one-sided. Donald Trump did not mention the Epstein Files in his State of the Union address. The administration is investing enormous energy in pursuing the Clintons. It is investing conspicuously little into the missing files that appear to concern the president directly. This is one reason Trump is so intensely focused on the Republican Party surviving the midterm elections by any means necessary. Democratic Representative Ted Lieu stated the logical endpoint plainly: when Democrats reclaim power, Donald Trump will testify under oath. The real damage, however, runs in both directions. The so-called Epstein class is increasingly defined not by party, but by privilege. A Reuters Ipsos poll conducted this month found that 69% of Americans believe the Epstein Files demonstrate that powerful people in the United States are rarely held accountable for their actions. That figure includes 58% of Republicans who strongly agreed, rising to 86% who agreed to some extent. And 75% of Americans believe the government is still hiding information about Epstein's associates. Human beings have an intuitive sense of fairness that transcends party and culture. Across partisan lines, the public does not believe accountability has been served. That is why this story will not go away. What happens next? The Clinton depositions are promised to be released publicly, though selective leaks will almost certainly arrive first, and they will be worth scrutinizing carefully when they do. The missing files will be pursued. The harder the DOJ works to withhold them, the larger that story will grow, and the more likely it is to cross what we might call the political species barrier, the threshold at which a story can no longer be contained within one tribe's reality. And the question of how much the so-called Epstein class becomes a defining issue in the midterms will depend, at least in part, on how effectively the strategy of making it stick only to the Democrats actually works. But the larger point is being lost in the noise. The real story of the Epstein Files is not about the monster himself and the suffering of his victims, as important and as unresolved as that story remains. It is about us. It is about the networks through which power really operates, about the ways those networks fail to self-correct, about the structures, legal, political, cultural, that either hold people accountable or protect them from accountability based not on what they did, but on their wealth, their connections, and the political tribe that shelters them. That is the story future historians will find most instructive. With the benefit of distance and reflection, they are likely to see it far more clearly than anything currently visible through the fog of partisan warfare and daily revelation. What they will make of this moment, of the remarkable, squalid, clarifying phenomenon that has been the Epstein Files, is hard to predict. But it is likely to be a great deal more insightful and a great deal more damning than anything you are going to read in the news over the next few months.